He's an intergalactic space warrior from the planet Sigma-9 and a part-time politician on Earth.
I'm going to price cap Wigan kebabs, 99 flakes and croissants.
He wants to nationalize the singer Adele, abolish the auto-renew function for online subscriptions, cap the price of ice creams, and he has a giant garbage bin for a head.
Yeah, my name's Count Binface, and I've entered the race to Clacton's new MP.
You've probably seen the pictures by now. I'm talking about Count Binface. And right now in the UK, votes are being counted for him in the by-election for the parliamentary seat of Clacton. He's the lead challenger for Nigel Farage, the controversial leader of Reform UK, who's held the seat since 2024.
I'm the only fresh thing on the menu. You're all sick of these politicians, as good as they're trying to be. But you need something different, a little bit of secret sauce.
Count Binface is a novelty act, the creation of a British comedian. But satirical political candidates have a long history, from Elmo to a man in a fish finger suit to an AI candidate named AI Steve. This is The Conversation Weekly, and I'm Justin Bergman, the international affairs editor for The Conversation in Australia. How did we end up with joke candidates as part of our political culture? And importantly, what does it say about our views on democracy? Richard Toye, welcome. You're a political historian at the University of Exeter in the UK, and you have studied candidates like Count Binface before. Let's start off by describing Count Binface. Who is he exactly?
Well, he came to be a galactic space warrior and to be 590 years old. In reality, he is a comedian called Jonathan Harvey, who's 46 years old, who has previously worked as a scriptwriter on comedy shows such as The Thick of It, which was very well known in the UK, a political satire. And Count Binface presents as a man with a bin on his head and a black cape and a slightly silly voice, and does a lot of interviews and creates campaign songs. And he's somebody who's been standing in elections under different guises since 2017.
And actually ran for the London mayor election in 2024 and managed to get quite sizable number of votes.
Yeah, over 20,000, and he outdid sort of Tommy Robinson, who's a sort of far-right leader of the English Defence League, so that was his claim to fame. So I guess that one thing which brought him some prominence is that in the UK system, when the votes are announced, the candidates generally stand on a stage behind the returning officer and can be photographed, or if it's live on national TV, you'll see this slightly surreal spectre of all the kind of normal candidates, and then Count Binface or whatever other comedy candidate is standing in some kind of costume, maybe next to the Prime Minister or party leader or something like that. So just a few weeks ago, Count Binface stood against Andy Burnham when he was running to be MP in the by-election, which ended up making him Prime Minister.
And what if Andy Burnham wins and he puts in a bid for the leadership? What do you think about that? Do you think he'll get it?
As I said to the gentleman from Sky News, I believe that elected mayors should carry out their full term before they're eligible for Parliament.
It's interesting to see how people standing next to them react. Do they take it in good part, as I think Andy Burnham did, or do they look a bit sour and uncomfortable? And, Count Binface has been doing this for quite a long time and probably just anticipated carrying on doing this. However, when Nigel Farage resigned as an MP, but then said he would stand in the by-election, which was going to follow, to be re-elected, to kind of make it a case of sort of the people versus the establishment, other people said that this was really an attempt to disguise or cover up wrongdoing about the large donations which he had received. Then the other major parties said, well, this is a stunt by Farage and therefore we're not going to participate, and essentially leave him a free run. Now that left essentially Count Binface as kind of the only real challenger. Now there are over 30 people standing. This is a kind of a record, but they are not from the big parties. And because I suppose he was the most prominent of these kind of range of independents, eccentrics, and kind of other comedy candidates, he actually became like the real challenger, which is obviously a rather surreal situation.
Yeah.
And so I think that has led to people around the world wanting to talk about this. Some people saying, well, why don't we have a Count Binface? We'd like one in our country. Why did the Brits get to do this?
To have all the fun.
Yes, exactly. So in a sense, obviously, when there's not a real political campaign going on in the conventional sense, then Count Binface is filling the vacuum.
And has the media been treating him like a conventional candidate? Is he doing interviews?
He's done quite a lot of interviews, and they're not really treating him quite like a conventional candidate insofar as everybody knows it's a joke and behave like that. And so, he obviously doesn't also behave like a conventional political interviewee. So if they say, what are your policies? He will say, well, you should have done your research. My policies are on my website.
Plus, I'll ensure that elected mayors are ineligible for Parliament until they've served their term of office. Cheeky.
He has a combination of silly policies, such as saying he wants to nationalise the singer Adele because she's like a national treasure and ought to be in public hands, and a range of things like that, making sure that hand dryers in pub toilets are better placed. And he wants to have the price of 99 flake ice creams capped at 99p. He wants to take the driving licenses away of people who drive past Clacton station with too loud exhausts. And he wants to make arcade grabber machines fairer, which, one can imagine a lot of people getting behind.
Yeah, my children would love that.
But also, in this election, he has a policy that candidates who, like Farage, resign from Parliament shouldn't then be able to stand in the subsequent by-election. Now, that's actually, whether you agree with it or not, it's certainly a credible policy which is worth discussing. And so people who don't like Farage, who want to vote for some kind of alternative, to a certain extent have rallied around Count Binface, who I think is playing it very cleverly. I mean, I will say I'm pretty sure that he's not actually going to win, but he does manage to, in a comedic way, articulate criticisms of Farage when interviewers say, for example, have you ever been to Clacton, the constituencies? He says, well, I didn't think this was a requirement for the job on the basis of Nigel Farage's behaviour, because he's not really known for turning up and being there very often.
So Count Binface is not the first satirical candidate to stand for election in the UK, right?
No, and I mean, the most famous was a man called David Such.
The youngest contender of the five, the national teenage candidate, is a 22-year-old pop singer whose latest disc is called Jack the Ripper.
He renamed himself Screaming Lord Such and stood from the 1960s initially as a candidate for what he called the Teenage Party, and then in the early 1980s founded the Monster Raving Loony Party, which is still going.
In their manifesto, the Raving Loonies say that butter mountains would be turned into ski slopes, Britain would be a tax haven, and hot air would be nationalised.
And there are actually 3 Monster Raving Loony candidates standing in Clacton.
Howling Lord Hope, the leader of the official Monster Raving Loony Party. This is the 38th time I stood for Parliament. I now hold the record for...
Such was a guy who actually had some serious point to make. He was disenchanted with politics and disenchanted with the establishment, and to a certain extent wanted to stick up a finger to the establishment.
Excuse me, is this a publicity stunt? Definitely not, sir.
But actually, his initial policies, Teenage Party policy, was votes for teenagers. Now, this was at a time when the voting age was 21, and it was only changed in the late 1960s when it was reduced to 18. So actually something which he'd been saying was a kind of a spoof policy just a few years earlier actually became a real policy. Similarly, all-day opening for pubs took longer, but so by the end of the 1980s that had happened too. And the subsequent leader, Alan Hope, actually was elected as a local councillor, and as far as we know, did a decent job of being a serious local councillor. So there's often a kind of a blurred line between the comedy candidates and actually try to make some serious point. And there are some people who do it purely for publicity, purely for entertainment. But behind the jokes, there are often serious points to be made.
Was David Such the pioneer of this movement? Was he the first satirical candidate of note, or were there earlier examples?
I suppose what I would say is that, who is regarded as being a joke candidate, because some people who take themselves very seriously are regarded by other people as jokes. And then, of course, there were the people who were written off as candidates, who were sort of thought not to have a credible chance. And I would highlight a guy called Edwin Scrimgeour, who first fought for the Prohibition Party against alcohol in Dundee in 1908. Nobody thought he had a chance. In 1922, he actually wins the seat. And who was the candidate who he defeated? Winston Churchill.
Oh, really? Wow. That's amazing.
And back in 1992, for example, there was a party called the Natural Law Party, and they were funded by ex-Beatle George Harrison, and they were completely sincere about trying to bring politics in line with the principles of transcendental meditation.
Natural law is the intelligence that guides the evolution of the whole universe. The Natural Law Party will establish a group of 7,000 experts in transcendental meditation and yogic flying.
Now, to the outside, they appeared to a lot of people to be extremely comical. One of the things which they demonstrated in their party political broadcast was something called yogic flying, which is people crossing their legs and bouncing up and down forwards on mattresses. And their party political broadcasts were very comical, if you like, or amateurish. And even if they picked up only 0.5% of the vote, they were still persuading a significant number of people to engage with them. They were going to public meetings where other candidates were addressing, they were putting their policies forward. And I suppose I would say that, again, this is the blurred line between what is comedy, what is serious. They were utterly straight-faced about it all, and that was what made it so funny in a way.
What's the broader perspective here? What's the point of all of this for these candidates? What are they trying to prove?
Well, I think in the case of Count Binface, he persistently says, well, what I'm trying to show is that there is something great about British democracy, which is that anybody can stand, and even a man with a bin on his head can do this and can be sort of up there with the other candidates. And that is what he wants to celebrate, as he says. But throughout democratic history of Britain, there have been all these people who have come forward as independents or as representatives of very obscure parties, and they really are part of the democratic process too, and that also they have got the potential to make a breakthrough. They're people who get written off and nobody takes seriously, and most of them, 99.9% of them will never get anywhere. And then suddenly it turns out that Count Binface is Nigel Farage's major challenger. Now, this actually makes a point about Farage himself, who has been in politics for 30 years, but somebody whose cause was ridiculed, was felt to be very marginal at the point where he started. And he has persisted, and he has obviously succeeded in changing the face of British politics.
And these satirical candidates, it seems as if they're becoming a part of the general political culture now, right? This is going to continue to grow in terms of a moment.
Well, I would always say that the idea that there's been a two-party system has been a big oversimplification. Right? It's always been more complicated than that, but clearly in the last few years there's been a progressive further breakdown of that, so that we really genuinely have multi-party politics. Reform UK, Farage's party, are serious contenders. The Greens now have a number of people in Parliament. The Scottish National Party for many years has had large numbers of MPs at Westminster. The Liberal Democrats have got the biggest number of seats that they've ever had, and so on and so forth. And so in this situation where you've got a proliferation of different voices and you've got the age of social media as well, with a lot of play very quickly, I think that, yes, these comedy candidates are not going to go away, and that the success of Count Binface is probably just going to encourage other people to try similar things in the future.
Coming up, what happens when the joke is on us? Are satirical candidates bad for democracy?
What are you going to have? Can I have 2 pieces of mullet, please? A piece of sea perch and 8 whiting fillets, please, Pauline.
From a fish and chip shop in regional Queensland
I believe we are in danger of being swamped by Asians.
to the heart of Australian politics, this is the unlikely story of the country's most controversial minor party.
Are you xenophobic? Please explain.
For 30 years, One Nation and Pauline Hanson have been ridiculed, dismissed and shut out.
Gone. I don't like it. No, I don't. Never did.
Now, no one's laughing.
One Nation continuing to surge in the polls.
Dramatic surge in support for One Nation.
The fringe becomes the mainstream.
This is the story of how a party built on fear and grievance thrived, died, and rose again to upend Australian politics.
Well, I'm back.
Hanson 2.0 is the serious, strategic, experienced, battle-hardened political operator that we see in the news today.
I'm Ashlyn McGee. This is The Making of One Nation from The Conversation, and you can search for it wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome back. So, Richard, what happens if a satirical candidate wins?
Well, this is the interesting question. I think that if Count Binface were to win, then he would try to do a serious job of representing the constituency. I mean, in terms of Westminster politics, it would be unprecedented, and I think that he would have to accept that he couldn't turn up in sort of full costume in the chamber of the House of Commons, and he would be an MP. But also, it's not only Westminster where there have been comedy candidates. So a few years ago now, in Hartlepool, when directly elected mayors were introduced, there was a man who stood as the sort of mascot of the local football team called Angus the Monkey.
Stuart Drummond, the former elected mayor of Hartlepool. Most people from outside the area will remember you as the football mascot, the independent Angus the Monkey, who confounded expectations back in 2002 when you got elected.
You know, I only stood in the election for a bit of fun, a bit of a joke. The same as this year, the team were doing really well at the time, and, you know, got a bit of publicity. And I thought, well, I might as well see it through. Never stood in an election before.
And, you know, he did it as a joke, but to his surprise, he won the election and actually served a couple of terms, and by all accounts was a credible mayor, that he dropped the monkey costume and was doing his best for the town.
It's easy to draw a bow and say Count Binface tells us a lot about the state of politics at the moment. But given satirical candidates have been around for so long, what does it say about us?
Well, I think it says that politics is a spectacle and we enjoy it. And let's just come out and say Count Binface is fun. I mean, I think that, of course, people like to fantasize or speculate about alternative realities in which Count Binface or other comedy candidates might win. And obviously, there is a situation where there is a kind of alienation from mainstream politics, yet at the same time, people want to feel represented by politicians. And equally, remember that they serve a function for the media as well, or for commentators. So when the Monster Raving Loony Party was founded, for example, back in the early 1980s, this was a time when the Labour Party was swinging to the left. And this gave right-wing commentators the excuse to say, well, look, who were the real loonies here? It's kind of the Labour Party with their extreme policies of gay rights or whatever it was. And so equally, of course, this is the immediate joke which occurs to everybody with Count Binface. So you'd have Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, saying, well, I'm not going to support a joke candidate with ridiculous policies in Clacton, and therefore I'm supporting Count Binface. That joke candidates serve as a distraction, a lightning rod, something for the media to talk about when they need to get people interested in elections, really. Actually, elections are in some ways terrible news for the media because you've got 3 weeks or more of kind of the same story over and over again. So how do you keep people's interest when most people, have kind of limited engagement or kind of limited tolerance for detail? And so things like public meetings have always been about spectacle and drama, and comedy candidates are just another aspect of that.
Yeah, but doesn't part of this mock the entire electoral system in a way? I mean, is this damaging for democracy in some respect?
Well, I think it's probably good for it to be mocked. I mean, in terms of actual mockery, you might remember the Monty Python by-election sketch where they have sort of the sensible party and the silly party.
And the silly party have held Leicester. What do you make of that, Norman?
Well, this is largely as I predicted, except that the silly party won. I think this is mainly due to the number of votes cast, Gerald.
And so I think that kind of elections are ripe for sort of humorous exploitation. And admittedly, it is a pretty weird situation that we are in Clacton at the moment, where the most sort of serious challenger to Nigel Farage is coming from a man in a ridiculous costume. One can well say, actually, should the major parties have stepped up and fought Farage in this situation? But in general, I don't think that comedy characters are an issue, because perhaps they do increase the interest of politics when it is important that people engage.
People are definitely paying attention to this election, that's for sure. Richard, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of The Conversation Weekly. You can read Richard's argument for why we need to take candidates like Count Binface seriously on our website now, theconversation.com. We've also linked to it in our show notes. Isabella Podwinski was the executive producer of this episode. Sound mixing and production is by Michelle Macklem, and our theme music is by Nita Sarl. Gemma Ware is head of audio, Ashley McGee is head of editorial innovation, and Misha Ketchel and Stephen Kahn are our editors-in-chief. The Conversation is a nonprofit news outlet dedicated to sharing the work of academic experts with a wider audience. If you like what we do, please support us at donate.theconversation.com. Thanks for listening.